my direction.
So you say Almaton Road is closed?
Not close, it's
Carolyn.
just crawling.
It was closed eastbound at Carolyn earlier. They had a fatality. I saw my baby trying to walk the block.
It took me 40 minutes to get from Almaton 49 to here.
Yeah, I went up to 108, I went down to 118 instead, and it still took me from 19 to 118 to here, was still about like 25 minutes.
Yeah. Definitely.
You,
Well, I don't know who bought these new ones, but
those are new?
they need to go away.
We put new chairs on the future in the budget.
Oh, you're speaking of,
Audience chairs too. Here,
our
we're
parts
still
inventory
thing.
guy, on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
And the one from Lunchroom, same one.
Yeah.
He was from Dunedin, and,
As long as my
Julie might have told me about, she found out when his
sit and cross my legs,
service was.
unless I have heels on. It's just not home. I mean, it's not low.
I know, I'm just always tripping.
This is the worst chair. It looks nice, but just.
I'm gonna add a item to the agenda. Bill's gonna give an update on the Jack Black Olives Roundtable and some Coast Big Cities
Okay.
discussion.
Good.
I figured we could fit that in after the meeting schedule.
Sure.
Kind of a change.
Steve Palmer.
But that's the other guy besides Harry Glenn with Van Squick.
Is that the one we met at the end?
The tall guy that, he got white hair or blonde hair. He didn't have lunch with us at the end, but he walked around with us. He had dinner with us the first night we were there.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Wendy. Good morning. He's like their transportation expert.
Okay.
St. Petersburg people can't get out here on time. Just the North County people have traffic.
Well, actually, we prefer to take the block out in 20 minutes, but
This is a
Whoa.
scary sight here at CSTA.
Wow.
Yes, I was, Edwina,
Talk about a scary
Oh, well, yeah.
okay, let's not, please don't post that.
We're gonna put that on Facebook. Show it to Megan.
Send it to me, Bill, I can
That was Rachel, Edward Scissorhands.
That's the face radio.
This is a lady for public records request. Contact her.
You don't pay?
You don't pay.
Yeah, she looked awesome, didn't she?
Oh.
I made the cut, the fake cut, the night before, because it takes so long for that liquid latex to dry.
Liquid
So,
latex.
I left it cut on my face, and in the morning, I just put the white and made it look pale.
Yes, I got an email from Terry this morning about umbrella stroller.
Yes, as a citizen.
And I thought,
Oh, God.
hey, wow.
Hey, Ben. Really? Traffic was.
I didn't see it on
Right
for
when
very
Davis
long.
is coming.
Nobody else dressed up, so I just about noon. I took it off.
She was umbrella stroller.
It should be ignition.
go in the employee newsletter, shouldn't it?
No.
We're now.
Yeah, now we have one bad.
Come on the website. Contact Rachel.
You wanna go to school, you wanna go to daycare, or?
Who pulled this up? I had the, did you put it up here? Okay, is this up first? Okay.
Is that way? Yeah, Janet won from me, but I guess, right?
I think Ben might be on that interest list as well.
I'm on that list. For the next meeting you talking about?
Yes,
That would be good. I was gonna
So total light bulb is not.
suggest that.
Okay, yes, I will consider that. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, seeing that we have quorum, we will bring the meeting to order. Roll call? Am I stuck in, I'm sorry, I'm just doing it the city council way. Okay. And we do have people approve the, gosh, I'm lost this morning already. Before we approve the agenda, we would like to add an item. Bill Johnson would like to give us an update on Jacqueline Vala's roundtable discussion from the Suncoast League of Cities. So I would suggest that we add that as after we discuss the meeting schedule.
Any public comment?
Public comment? Seeing that there's no one here for public comment, do we,
Move approval for adding the item.
all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. If we could review the September 2nd meeting minutes, which are in your packet. Any comments or move approval?
I move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Moving along to the 2016 meeting schedule. I have a question. There's a jump from October 5th to September 30th, and
Should that be November?
well,
It should be November, I would
should
say.
it be November?
Oh,
But November 30th. Wait. Let's get on the right year here. November 30th is a Wednesday. So is that a typo that after October 5th we should have November 30th at the bottom?
No, September 30th.
Or is it
No, at the bottom.
October 30th?
Oh, yeah.
Let me look real quick on my calendar and see what I did.
Darn spell checker.
What did I do? Oh, I think it was, Wednesday the 30th, because the 7th is the board meeting. So I went the week before, but we can, if you don't think that'll work.
September? Are you talking about?
November,
The very last one
the
on the
last
page.
one. I
So,
was supposed to say it was supposed to be
Okay.
November 30th.
so we'll correct that last one
Yeah.
to November 30th.
I move approval of the schedule with the correction.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair Johnson would like to give us an update on the Suncoast League of Cities.
Thank you. This was on same day as the legislative delegation meeting, so I guess that was Tuesday of last week. And we met as the Suncoast League of Cities with Senator Laptop, and he reported on the end of his campaigned for the Senate presidency, and said that now that he's not doing that, he has freed up time and he's identified two things that he really wants to work on. One is keeping the Rays in Pinellas County. And the second one is mass transit. And in mass transit, he said that he thought that that is one of the keys to keeping the Rays in Pinellas County. He talked about a preferred location being the Candy Dog Track for the new stadium. But when he, and he mentioned that one of the things he likes about the dog track is that there's a rail line going into downtown Tampa on the other side of the bridge, and that there is some kind of a pipeline that goes through or near the
Natural gas services to Wheaton Island.
okay, that he thought could also be a transit corridor feeding into that area. So, but he thinks that one of the keys is to, in mass transit, is to merge HART and PSTA. And he observed that he thinks that that's the place that he should start when dealing with his transit priorities. He noted that both of them are near or at their millage cap, and he believes that there is a solution to that millage cap is combining the two organizations. He recognized that the surveys didn't show much savings from consolidating HART and PSTA, but he said that he didn't think that that made common sense. He thought that companies merge all the time to save money, and so he believes that there is money to be saved by merging the two systems. And that was we pulled that one here. And I don't know, Councilmember Newton, you were there as well. You might have anything else to add.
But that was about it. He looks at the right-of-way for the natural gas line that's being able to be used for a transit corridor. And also, he says there's some rails that run right up to the Candy area. So we thought about that location, but the Rays want to look over in Tampa. They don't want to look at Pinellas. And that's been the whole gist of this whole thing. They want to be able to look outside the area. To me, it's like a game of Twister. They got a in on an 85-acre trop site. They want to hold on to the big tractor over here. They got a trop done over here, and they want to go to Tampa. I don't know what's going to come out of that, but it's obvious that mass transit is going to play a major role, not just with the Rays, but in luring corporations to relocate and bring their jobs and their money here. They want to be able to get their employees from A to B. They want to know how you're going to do that, and do we have the sustained infrastructure to do that. Raise is the most important now because they're here, but in the future, if you want to try to draw, that's mostly how they do the CEO checklist. They look at how can we move the people around, is there reliable transportation or mass transit, and the answer is no, no, and no. But that's all he had. That's all I had to say.
He was asked what his position was on the CSX proposal, and he said basically that he hadn't formulated a conclusion on that yet. Although I know that the TMA is moving forward with that very aggressively, and there will be a meeting here at PSTA on December 11th.
Yes.
On the CSX TMA.
He's also suspending his candidacy for presidency of the Senate to the chair of appropriations. So he's going to try to use that bully pulpit to try to get some things done. Vis-a-vis getting things passed early in the budget, so the governor won't have time to veto it in the end to get it funded with a resolution. He's looking at doing some things like that, maybe to get so the funds will stay and won't get hard, because the governor is asking for $1 billion in tax cuts. So a lot of things that people want probably going to get hacked in the end if you don't get this billion. So, horse trading.
Well, I think it's interesting that he's back on the idea to merge Hart and PSTA. I wonder if, in the event that Go Hillsborough were not to succeed, I wonder if that would, the next step would be to talk about a regional transit district, City of Tampa and City of St. Pete. I wonder if that follows. I'm thinking in that direction, but that's just speculation.
You said Tampa and St. Pete for a funding? Oh, we did ask him that question. And that was, the question was, could a city enact an infrastructure tax? And would the legislature support that? He said, no way, Jose. That right now, they're not going to vote for any additional tax. And even...
Well, I think also discussing it right now would undermine Go Hillsborough. So that's why I was careful to say, in the event if that didn't happen, would that be the next thing to look at?
Well, that is a Florida League of Cities priority to provide home rule options, but he said he was very direct in saying he didn't think there would be any chance of that.
Is it Zach?
Sorry, but let's hear from Ben.
Thank you for the update, and I was just gonna ask, I mean, if the Hart and PSTA idea is sort of back on the horizon of an idea that's gonna be discussed, are there, would it be possible to send us the studies that the chairman referred to that were done on that merger, just because I'd like to familiarize myself with those. I mean, I saw those reported whenever that idea first came up several years ago, but I've never actually read them, so I don't even know.
Yeah, I'd like to see him again too, because it's been a while.
But that's good intelligence to know what he's thinking, so.
I had suggested to the CEO that we might have our finance committee look at least the last study and see if there's any updates to, it was, because it was done about 5 years ago, I think.
No, it wasn't that long.
3 years ago, maybe?
That was
3.
about two.
It was several years ago, I know.
It's my first project when I arrived.
Okay.
First one or second one?
My first project.
Yeah.
And I guess the piece of it that I didn't follow is the relationship between the merger idea and the millage rate cap. I mean, is he thinking that with a merger there'd somehow be an additional, a higher rate cap for one entity, or?
What he articulated was that he believes there are savings that can be achieved with the merger, despite the fact that the savings of the studies that he required be done did not show that. So he somehow thinks that there is, and we have a challenge to move him through that process. And I don't.
He's never mentioned to me, or we never had any discussions with the studies about changing the millage, the way the PSC millage and the Hart millage work, to my knowledge.
The only thing that came up was he said that he understands that both agencies are bumping up into the millage cap.
Right, and that's why he takes this opportunity now. He says, his exact words were, let them bleed out on the millage that they have. He's against any tax increases, and he's hopefully that if they get up above their villages and can provide adequate service, they will look at that more feasibly. We went through the whole process. I was on that committee. We drove back and forth to Tampa. The problem, as I saw it, was you have I don't know how many governor appointees on the Hart board. It's several.
Three.
Is it three, four? But he is excited about the new CEO, the young lady over there. He says he's a breath of fresh air. So he's excited about that. And So I think he's gonna try to, I don't know, I mean, he's definitely not gonna allow any more taxes. So, and he's not really sure that the new referendum that Israel is gonna make it believe. We spoke about, again, like I always said, pay for premium services like managed lanes and whatnot, and I brought the ferry thing up to him. He said that that's an option. You know, you have to look at things that people will pay for what they want. You know, somebody, I forget what meeting I was in, somebody testified that they were going through the managed lane at 10:50 because it was that time of day and it was congested, but they got right through it, and then subsequently looked at the bill, and it was $10.50. But people will pay for what they want. The approach of, we definitely know we need mass transportation, but the approach of getting people to tax, pay taxes to pay for it is never been really big. I think that when I mentioned that to him, that we look at more pay for use for premium services and people primarily pay for it. But he's against any more taxes. He's hopeful that once both organizations hit their millage cap, not to start cutting and doing stuff that may be more amenable to a merger. He says, just like any mergers, you have 2 CEOs, you have 2 this, 3 that, and he says, every merger has savings because they have multiple and triplicate and duplicates in the positions, and that's his mindset. The reports we got back, the first one came back it was a low level, I guess, a desk study that said that we're doing some things together. We buy fuel, I think, and we do some benchmarking. So we're doing some things with our. The second one came back, said that they wouldn't save much, maybe $20,000 or something like that. And he was not happy with either one of them. So, and he funded them, by the way. He provided funds for us to do the studies. So it wasn't an unfunded mandate.
Well, always interesting to hear the vision for mass transit from state leaders that don't want to raise taxes. So let's move on to our next subject, which is hearing from Cassandra Borchers on our Central Avenue BRT application. Thank you.
Speaking of transit to keep the raise in Pinellas County, this is one of those. As you said, Senator Lavelle.
Yes.
This is a project that we've been talking about for a very long time. In fact, we've been studying it for about 15 years or more. It's one of those things that keeps coming up in our work, both in terms of the MPO looking at the county and PSTA looking at what our opportunities are. This particular corridor continues to come up as one of the most important transit corridors in the entire region. These are the alternatives that we put into our legislative package last year and then again this year, looking at connections from downtown St. Petersburg to the beaches, looking at some options, and always looking at alternative ways to make the connection on that transit market between downtown and the beaches is really important as we start to talk about getting federal dollars to support the capital investment. So right now, this is still a #1 priority for PSTA. It was the #1 priority for the bus rapid transit and the rapid corridors coming out of the community bus plan, and is our #1 priority for the incremental expansion on the path forward. It's on your legislative agenda. It is in the fiscal 16 budget. And we've been talking to the City of St. Petersburg staff about this for a while now, too. They've done some preliminary traffic studies, we'll have to take another look at this, that say that as long as the right turns on the First Avenue North and First Avenue South can be maintained, there is some opportunity, maybe just during the peak hour, to have a bus lane with some turning movement. So we're talking to the MPO about making adjustments to their LRTP. Because we have this in our fiscal year 16 budget, it makes it pretty easy for them to make that change. And we've also been asking FDOT for the remaining funding that we need in order to advance the environmental clearance and the design. So this is our current funding plan. has to come from the federal New Start program, and then after that, that other 50% comes from state and local sources. There is a source of funds out of central office DOT called the State New Starts Program, and that program is specifically designed to leverage federal funds to come to the state of Florida. The southeast region of the Federal Transit Administration and Tallahassee are always looking for good projects. They're especially looking for good BRT projects in the southeast. This is the New Starts process and the Small Starts process that we would need to go through in order to capture those federal dollars. The first step is to apply to enter into project development. And what that means for the Small Start is we finish our clearance through the National Environmental Policy Act, we gain those commitments for the non-small starts funding, and we do the engineering and design so that we know what the project really is before we apply for the grant funding. So we have to get all those details worked out. This is a little more detail about what a proposed schedule would look like if we advance this project. So, as I mentioned, it has already made it's already a significant priority for the region and for PSTA. What we would do in advancing the Small Starts project development is work with the MPO, get some ducks in order for the city of St. Petersburg, getting some of that letters of support, and starting to build that case and the product that we need to send into the FTA, which we then send into them in the early part of next year. In the spring, once we gain their concurrence to enter into project development, we would then get down into the details. This includes impact analysis on traffic and communities, and looking at the potential ridership through our travel demand modeling. But the most important part of this portion of this project is making sure that we are engaging the public, we are engaging our community partners, and we are talking about what the project ought to be for us as a transit agency, but also for the community. We would finish that late next year, early following, so late 2016, early 2017, and get to that point where we can ask for a funding grant agreement with the Fed. Now, this is a long time frame, and every time we talk to them, it gets pushed out a little bit more because they like you to have a lot of time in there. The rules are that once you enter project development, you can take no more than 24 months to complete that. That being said, this is a very, very small project in the grand scheme of projects, and we think that we can finish the bulk of the work within the year. A lot of places do this a lot faster if they go for different kinds of funding sources. So this is what would be required in order to obtain federal dollars. If we paid for this through all local funds, like the Hart Metro Rapid did through the CIP, we're able to do this much, much faster. So this is just so you understand that getting federal funds takes some time.
I'm sorry, Katrina, can you just say that one more time? Like, when does what starts the clock ticking, and what does the 2 years apply to?
So the 2 years applies here where it says we receive concurrence to begin project development. That's when the clock starts ticking, 2 years. And again, we think we've done enough work on this corridor. We know the corridor well enough, and we've done enough of the legwork in terms of talking with the city to understand that this project could take about a year for us. And that includes going through the NEPA process. And so what we're asking for today is your approval to go to the board and ask to enter into project development.
So moved.
Did we get a letter from St. Pete yet?
We have asked them, we've talked to them, we have a letter from the mayor, but we are going to city council December 3rd to make this presentation as soon as we get through our board committee.
And on December 3rd, we don't need a commitment yet from the city as far as that whole issue about the left lane, right lane.
No, I think that it would be an agreement so that it is on the table.
Okay. We have a motion. More discussion?
We're going to do a second.
Oh, I'll second it. I had a question though. Cassandra, can you go back and explain again how this gels on the slide with the state funding from DOT and the federal grant? So we have this legislative proposal on their state level for the central BRT funds that we're working for at DOT. Can you talk, I'm confused about how this all
Sure.
sort of gets put together.
So there are two pots of funding that we're talking about. One is what we've been asking the state for, is here. So we've asked the state to help us fund the environmental clearance. So we have a certain amount in our budget under our federal formula grant that is dedicated to long-term planning. And so that would be applied to the work that needs to be done here, whether that's environmental, engineering, public engagement, whatever. In order to finish that portion of the project, which is really the project development phase, we're asking for support from the Department of Transportation. We've gotten a lot of positive discussion on that, and we think that once the board says, yes, we're going to go forward, that they will help us do that. So that is one piece. So that's the $1 million on your legislative agenda right now, is sort of that first step of here in order to do these things. So once we have that money entering into the project development phase, that's where we are. The other piece, this, is the grant for the capital expense. So the $1 million is here, the 16 is here. And that's how you get the 16, 18 Fed, 4 from the state, and 4 from us.
And
Would it be possible just to make sure everything stays focused and going forward? Would it be possible if we put together like a document of what each step is, sort of the deadline, and have FTA sign off on it, whereas we both agree that we understand that this is the steps and these are the deadlines on a time frame, so that there's absolutely no question or miscommunication?
That is a part of our application. When we apply, we send in the letter requesting to enter into project development. That is a required section. So we've already, and I know you and Commissioner Long have been up with Brad to talk to some of the FTA folks. Mm-hmm. So they've seen this once. They've seen it twice. This is with their edits, and we'll send this up to them again.
Okay, great.
Before we even put in the application, they are very willing to work with us to make sure that once we give them the 6 to 10 page letter application, that is good. So we'll talk about all the different pieces with them before we actually submit the final.
And I guess, and then I'll hand this over to you, one of my takeaways from our meeting with FTA was that they are also really looking at our public outreach. They don't want us to walk down the road and then find out that there's a significant portion of St. Petersburg that has some problem with us. So the good news is I think we know how to do that. I think this is a popular project, but maybe I'm talking to my St. Pete colleagues as much as my PSTA ones. But I think that would be incumbent upon the city and PSTA to take that public engagement piece very seriously.
This one, for that corridor, is going to be very serious, because that's the same corridor Duke Energy just put huge concrete poles right down in front of everybody's yard on First Avenue South. So, and they were not happy at all. Duke did I think, one big meeting at the center. Some people came out, but after that, they just went along. Then one morning, you come home, and you got a monument in front of your house in the right of way with high voltage lines. So you definitely gonna, and that goes from, I live on 52nd, that goes from 50, I would say from 50th all the way down, the power plant is on 50th Street, the substation, but from 50th all the way down First to 34th Street, that just in that one quarter, those people are not happy. And you will see, just look up Michigan Poles. That's on First Avenue, which is one of the proposed routes. So, to my colleague, she's exactly right. You're going to definitely need some severe outreach there, and going door to door if they have to. Because, like I said, they had a meeting, they did publicize it. About maybe 10 or 15 people came. I was there. But, you know, when they started plopping them poles in the I got a gazillion phone calls. They were not happy. But it was being done. So.
That is always when you go up to SBA and you talk about one of these major capital investment projects, those are the kinds of questions they always ask. And we really need to be prepared for that. I've worked on projects, federal NEPA projects, where we were concerned about the neighborhood, so we went door to door to talk to people because there were tenants in the neighborhood, and so you couldn't send a property owner letter and make sure that the people didn't. So you really have to think. Now that maybe not apply here because of the size of the corridor, but on that particular project, we had some very targeted public engagement based on the community, what type of community it was, and how we needed to really get people.
Access to data, what we normally did from a neighborhood president standpoint, when I was president, we got utility bills. Because the owner record gets the official paperwork, but the people live there pay the water bill. And those are the ones probably one of the biggest problems, because they're the ones that deal with it. So that's one source you might look at. We do have that information. Who's,
Also why these projects take so long. If we just did this based on the technical, it would probably take.
Well, you just saw with the Wiggins Park project.
For the world, that would be.
Yeah, and at our last meeting, you hear people saying, we didn't know this, we didn't know that, They're always going to do that. I mean, that's not going to stop, but just another, I guess, as it pertains to right-of-ways, when we're looking at running a fixed line, not a fixed line, but an express line through there, and because they're parking here now, some of them are parking on First, and if you're doing right turns and dedicating the lane, the car is going to probably go into the yards and not on First Avenue. You're going to need that lane for that, and that this communication probably better. I mean, that's on that thing. If I know in that stretch, like I said, you look up, you'll see them concrete poles, so you know exactly the perimeter we're talking about. It's not all of First, but it's a portion right there. And like my colleague said, it might be a segment of people that come running. But he gave us power lines, and now we have to move our cars, and we can't do this and that.
And there are things that we can do without, without having a dedicated lane. So we'll look at all of those options and have the full public discussion.
Right. One more thing. We were there last session. We were at halftime, and then we talked about something. If we got approved for, I guess, to one agency that it'll help us in the new market line. Remember, it was enough time the guy said, "You guys get this approval, and we can accept that. You ain't got to go through this."
Well, yeah, go back. On the pie chart.
Yeah,
That's basically the action item that I'm hoping that the board takes out of this is two things. One, a recognition. This is a $16 million project. The only way to access the Fed $8 million and that state $4 million. The state $4 million is a guarantee, but only if you get the 8. Only if you get the Fed to approve. You can't. I've now found out in the last month. There's no way to get access to the state $4 million without getting the Fed, going through the federal process. But I don't think the PSCA board, even though this has been our #1 project, really have a full understanding and has any kind of concept. This is not going to be a reality until 2021 if we go down this road. I don't know any other. I mean, the way Hart did it, the county just gave them $30 million in cash out of their penny for vanilla. And county hasn't offered that yet. So we're going to go down this road. It's going to take a long time.
And the thought is that we're going to bring this will be discussed at the board's meeting in December. So,
yeah.
Okay. I guess the one thing I would think about with regard to that discussion is some explanation or thought about our piece of the pie chart, the PSCA capital reserve piece. Just because I think that I think there's interest in the board about how we're using our reserves, and, I mean, I'm fully supportive of this project. I think this is great, so go for it. I just, you know.
Yeah, well, we have the finance committee tomorrow is going to see a presentation about our reserves that will hopefully bring a summarized version to the board on. That, you know, we have the $4 million. We have our $4 million.
Right,
Okay.
Okay.
For now. I mean, maybe by 2021 we'll be desperate and we're wanting to steal that away for buses, but.
Right, and understand, the project has vehicles in it.
Right.
To-
So that helps us with the bus purchase
Right.
issue, right, okay, and I think that's a good point. Great.
Okay, so we have a motion for this committee to send to the general board the recommendation to approve the creation and submittal of an application to the FTA to enter the project and development phase for the Central Avenue BRT project.
Read that again?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Cassandra. Our next informational item is on the federal low-no grant. Did we want Ray Robinson, I'm sorry, Van Squig to call in and listen in at this point?
Okay. Later?
Sure.
Okay.
Didn't we know we were
Apparently
gonna get
there's
here?
like 3 versions.
Yes.
Terrible.
You gotta call it something else.
Either way.
I think
Actually, my past Robertson down and then he came back.
I ended up saving them in the public drive because I was worried about pulling them off the drop-off. And I was problems
Okay.
with them, so
Who do we have on the phone?
this should be it. Brad's
So
edit.
we're open, but they just haven't called in yet? Okay. Okay, so we're going to hear from Brad Miller on the federal low-no grant.
Okay. As you know, at our last meeting, we had a long, lengthy discussion about electric buses and all kinds of bus purchases, and the board unanimously voted to submit a federal application, which is due on Monday. And Commissioner Ben Diamond, I think, was the one who suggested that this committee meet and have a better understanding of the application, and so that's what I hope to give you in the next few minutes.
Hello, I don't know who just joined us on the line, but Brad Miller is about to get started with a presentation on our federal low-no grant application.
Hi, it's Steve Palmer, Advanced Craig Associates.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve. Okay, thanks for joining. So I think some of you might have a little bit of knowledge of the federal low-no, it's called low emission or no emission program. But it is a program that was created under MAP 21, and it is also included, Steve can correct me, in some versions of the transportation bill that's moving through Congress now. It is a priority of the FCA board that you, the legislative committee, voted on to support Congress continuing to have a low or no emission grant program. You can see what kinds of projects are eligible across the country for these programs, but essentially they are the vast majority of projects they've approved in previous rounds have been electric buses. There's only $22.5 million nationwide available in this round of NOLO grants, with the deadline for the applications due on Monday. So it's going to be heavily competitive, but I think we have done a great job, thanks to some great partnerships I'm going to talk about, but also thanks to a lot of hard work by Sandra and Christina Trenell, who's back there, is the one who's our NOLO diva. She's been doing that. I'll load you. Yeah. There's some other requirements about what we have to be in order to be eligible to go for this grant. You can apply for 85% of the cost of electric buses, but you get credit, or at least we've been advised and we have seen that your grant will be more favorably viewed if you overmatch it with more local match. So we have put together a rather robust program. We have a draft of the actual grant application, but in
An abundance of caution.
in an abundance of caution, Cassandra suggested us not passing it out and necessarily making it public in case there's some other city out there that would copy and paste our awesome application. Our secret. Louisville, if you're watching.
I thought Louisville already had one.
Louisville does. Some others do. I talked at the Florida Transit meeting. I don't think there's other state people that are going for it. We got two routes that we're proposing with electric buses for this pilot program. One is the downtown St. Petersburg circulator. It essentially is an enhanced version of an existing circulator we have called Route 32, which is essentially shown here as the routing that, this is pretty much what it is.
The current routing versus the February 14th routing, yes.
Well, basically, in downtown St. Petersburg, PSTA has two circulators, or supports two circulators. One is the looper trolleys, which we provide funding for, and it sort of operates a little bit closer to the bay front. And then this Route 32 is a very low, limited service route. There's only one bus that goes on this loop. But it serves some low-income housing that is over on the west side here, and we found out in the public meetings serving the medical area and the Publix are key destinations on this. But this would be enhanced to run twice as often and in both directions. One of the sort of transit planning 101 is loops that go only in one direction are not very helpful to folks, because you get off, and to get back on, to go back home, you have to go all the way around the loop. It's much better to have bi-directional loops so you can go back to where you started. The second part of our application is Route 11, which essentially operates primarily on 28th Street from South St. Pete all the way up here to PSTA. And the reason for this route is to show a pilot for extended range buses, how electric buses can be used and implemented throughout our fleet on our regular route services. This also allows us to put a charging station right here at PSTA, out here on 28th Street, which we call the lay-by, which is where there's a bus stop there. And we would have a charging station there, so then in the future it could be expanded even further. But both these routes, and especially this one, meet a key component, an overall Federal Department of Transportation priority under current Secretary Anthony Fox that he entitled Ladders of Opportunity. His priority as Transportation Secretary is what I saw in a speech. He described his own experience in Charlotte growing up in Charlotte and as the mayor of Charlotte, giving people using transportation to connect especially low-income areas to jobs and opportunity to move up or to move out of their neighborhoods and have opportunities. And that's what both these routes do very, very specifically, connect areas to job centers. So here's the Route 11 as it is today. From South St. Pete up, it does connect over here to US 19 and the Fennels Park Tennis Center, and then comes up here sort of through the gateway area to PSTA. Again, as we discussed at the board meeting, electric buses need electric buses and they need charging stations, which are substantial infrastructure to be invested in. What we're proposing is that there would be 2 fast charging stations, basically one per route, and 5 slow charging stations, and 5 slow ones would be here at PSCA to charge overnight. In some of the other information that you, the board, received at the PSCA board meeting, that was some of the discrepancy, that if you don't buy a charger, just like your phone, it runs out and then it can't be used anymore. You need these charging stations. One thing we have learned in researching other successful applications is the value of partnerships in the Fed's value when rating your grant. And one group that exists is that they seem to have a great track record. I think 6 out of 10 partnered with the Center for Transportation and the Environment out of Atlanta. They're kind of like the Low-No Grant Association or facilitators. We've already talked with them. They are advising us on our application. They've helped us put it together. And then, of course, we are partnering with Proterra, the bus manufacturer. And we have met with them, and they're part of our grant specifically. FTA values specifically naming the type of vehicle that you're going to test under your pilot. We've had some discussions. I've had a couple of phone calls with Duke Energy, and I know some board members of PSCA have had some discussions with Duke Energy about perhaps that they would be a partner as well. I don't think Harry Glenn is going to be joining us on the call because he is working hard right as we speak, trying to get all these letters signed by our congressional delegation in support of our application. And he's been doing a great job, as far as I can tell from the emails, getting our entire congressional delegation to sign on to support of this application. And you can see, I think there's even some that are missing on the downtown partnership. Congressman Bill Rackus has already signed one. He's not on here.
Brad, this is Steve Palmer. Senator Nelson has also sent a letter as well. He just got that
We got that
last night.
this morning.
Okay, great. So again, it's only $22 million for the entire country, so it's going to be incredibly tough. We might get shut out. Florida seems to get shut out of a lot of these federal programs. Totally got shut out of Tiger. But I think we've put together a really very solid application that has a number of strengths. One, it uses both types of electric buses that are out on the market, the fast charging and the extended range. 2 is we have a substantial overmatch of local match funds proposed with the project, and we've got this very specific detailed route proposal on how we would use the electric buses that meet the DOT priority of connecting both their economic development programs, connecting low-income neighborhoods, but also connecting job centers with these programs. So the total cost, if we were to implement all of this, is $9.5 million, which we are matching almost 50-50, with PSDA matching 4.6, and then we have an application in to the Fed at 4.8, 4.9. I think it's probably unlikely that we get 4.9 out of 22.5 nationwide, but we have a scalable project, and we will take whatever they're giving us.
Just, I'm confused on the amounts. Total project is 9.5, and our match is
4.65, which what we're proposing to match is there are 9 electric buses we're proposing under this project. The PSDA will pay the equivalent diesel price of all 9 of those buses. So that's $4.5 million. The diesel equivalent is $500,000. And then we will pay a match of $150,000 for the charging stations. I didn't put on here the grant application would be the balance. So that's about $4.9 million for the feds to match. Oh, no, I'm a positive glass half full guy. I mean, we could. 4.5 million to 1 is probably at least, Steve can probably answer better than I, but
What has been
I'm
the
sure
spread-
they'll try to allocate to many different cities.
What has been the spread on electric buses that's been awarded through this conglomerate, this electric consortium? The ones that have won bids, what has been the spread? Have there been, when I'm talking about the match versus the money that they were asking?
Yeah, well, a lot of them, at least from what I've seen, they applied for more than they got. I don't know, Steve, if you know on the phone the largest one that has ever been awarded. I think maybe somebody about maybe $10 million. I think Long Beach.
Were they leveraging $10 million? That's my question. Was it a $20 million project?
I think it was probably more than 10.
Yeah, I think, Brad, if I can jump in real quick, I know that the first round of Lono grant awards, there was, I think, about a total of $45 million, and what that is significantly larger than this year's allocation of money, and that's because FTA took 2 years' worth of funds and did it in one grant solicitation. So the $22.5 million reflects 1 year's availability of funds.
Well, I'm talking about the agencies that prevailed. What was the total cost of the award that they got versus their match? That's what I was asking. Because if you have any examples of one historically who got money?
All that information is available. We can get that to you. They're in the neighborhood of $2 to $5 million is what cities got for. You have to apply for a minimum of 5 electric buses. You can't apply for less than that. So.
But the reason I was asking, because we make ours more attractive, you said there's excessive local match, more than required. I'm just wondering, how did that work? How did that fare historically? The people that got awarded $2 or $3 million, were they proposing, more than 50% of the match?
Most of the successful projects last go around use this model.
Okay.
Where the local applicant, the city that applied, paid for the diesel equivalent cost, and that the feds only had to pay for the upcharge to make it electric.
See, the reason I'm asking that is because I know it won't fund the whole thing, but if it gets you into the conversation, the next round of funding, you may get a little more, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You start building some relationship. But I was just curious as to the model, historically, has that worked? Because if they only got 22 million, obviously they got a lot of people that want it, so they may say, we'll do 10 and 2 million each, something like that. So that's why I was asking, how does that work?
If I can, this is Steve again. I just looked up, in February of this year, FTA awarded a total of 10 grant awards that totaled $54 million that's available.
That's right.
And grant awards range from $9.8 million to $1 million.
How was you don't see the matching of the ones that prevailed, the 10 that prevailed, do you? What they were offering?
Well, they don't have that, but
Okay.
what Brad suggested is exactly right, that FTA has an expectation that the local transit agency will cover the cost, the equivalent of the diesel bus.
Okay.
And that this grant award is for the increment above that.
Okay.
In the application, does it help if this has any sort of public health angle? If we were to tie this into, I'm kind of making this up, but like a countywide effort towards health and all policies, or because I know we're not under the gun for Clean Air Act issues, but if there was a public health angle, does that help, or is this just pretty much how much we're willing to put up to match to get the funds?
I think that can't hurt.
If I could jump in, and I'm sorry to do this on the phone, but there are 2 initiatives that FTA really is emphasizing in the applications. One is new, or one is one Brad mentioned, and that's the ladders of opportunity. And then there's a new one that FDA only came out with at their annual meeting 6 weeks ago, and it's very new, but they're calling it Ride to Wellness. And it's exactly what you're talking about. They want to emphasize how transit can be used to go to take people to healthcare, doctor's appointments and hospitals and things like that. So, again, it's called Right to Wellness. It's not at all totally fleshed out yet, but I think you've touched on it. If it can be added to the grant application, it's a really good aspect to be considered.
Yeah, the downtown St. Pete Circulator connects Bayfront Children's Hospital, Sunshine Senior Center, and St. Anthony's Hospital.
So access to medical.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
The
11, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
It goes to Grand Central. It stays west of hospital areas over here.
Maybe we need to look at the routes that service the VA.
We looked at a number of routes with Proterra to pick these two. So that you've identified some of the reasons that we picked the downtown circulator, and understanding that that is the quick charge pilot. This is the extended range pilot. We wanted to pick something that comes to our facility. And the reason is because that makes it really very useful to have that quick charger at our facility for a couple of reasons. One is we can bring all of the quick charge vehicles, the fast charge vehicles, into the maintenance area for the evening and charge them up before they come inside the fence. The next is because of the location of it, we could then have an easy expansion. We also looked at this, and this route is using the extended range. So these are better charged with those slow chargers, which is why we have one per bus in the maintenance facility plus a maintenance charger. So there's 5 slow chargers at our facility. This allows us, like I mentioned, for easy expansion, but it's also the size of the route gives us the data that we need to know how we would expand the service to the rest of the fleet. And so they're long enough to give us the information and short enough to minimize any issues.
That's an excellent pilot, because even on the routes, when you got them en route, the charging stations, they're not going to be not utilized all the time. But having one here centrally located, you got one to support that down there, one to support one over here on the same bus that are in that loop. So it's not just, if it was downtown, well, eventually I guess it'll be en route, but if it started out just downtown, another bus would have to come to downtown to be able to get charged and be able to use it. Not just the ones on that route. Being here, you can have the ones here, go service downtown, there could be another one that goes service somewhere else. So that's great to start it out there, it makes sense.
Mayor Beavis.
Yeah, just probably a dumb question, but as part of this grant process, we've identified these 2 routes. Is that something that when we get the award, that it's locked in? Is that something that they must stay on these routes? Or is that something that if we found a more efficient route 2 years from now that you'll be able to change them? It's just kind of a silly question, but if there's a better use for the bus. Once we get the grant and we get the buses, are we locked into these 2 routes for some period of time, or could they be moved?
I think there is some negotiation that goes on.
No, yeah.
To the extent that we get less money than we're applying for, then there will have to be changes, and we can negotiate with them. But they will have a scope of work that we'll have to comply with. I know, 10 years from now, this Route 11 changes, or...
Yeah, that's kind of my question is, there becomes a more efficient route. Somebody mentioned the VA, that it may work over there. Are we locked to these, or is it flexible enough that we could change them?
Once the pilot's over, can you do your options?
Yeah, well, we understand that there is some flexibility after a certain period of time.
Okay.
Right. You would implement them here, do your testing, but let's say you said, well, let's see if it would work on this other route. Well, first you wanted charging
Sure.
capabilities on that route. But if we said, hey, let's try these for one service change on the 52, which comes by the lay-by. We could do that if we wanted to, just rotating.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So
It's
there
only
is,
if we have a sensitive.
yeah, but we have to get some definitive answer about how long is that pilot required?
Okay.
Does Van Scoyac need any more information from us as we go forward, and what's the next step? Are we giving this presentation to the full board, or are we going to do a short report from the legislative committee?
I think that the application is due on Monday, this coming Monday, so it'll be in, and we'll be having our fingers crossed in hopes that we get some positive word in early 2016, but we'll give a short
Okay, we'll give a short report
report to
then.
the board.
Okay. So in the interest of keeping on time and moving along, let's move to our federal and state legislative updates. And we'll let Steve Palmer lead us off from Van Scoyac.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like to do is just kind of highlight two major bills that are moving through the Congress right now, and then bring it down to how they're affecting USDA. The first one is the transportation authorization, and that's the multi-year bill that Congress does every 3 to 5 years. The one that's pending in Congress right now, they're calling the DRIVE Act. It's an acronym, so don't ask me what that stands for. But it is intended to be a multi-year bill that sets policy and funding levels for several years so that transit agencies can make plans and know how much money they're going to be getting through funding. So just real quick as background, both the House and Senate have had their respective bills. The next step in the process is the conference committee comes together to reconcile the differences between the two bills, and that's happening right now. In fact, the conferees will have their first meeting tomorrow morning, and their goal is staff has been working to try to resolve the easy issues, but their goal is to try to reconcile the differences so they've got one final bill they can send to the president. And there are two major issues that are outstanding and holding progress up, so to speak. One is, there's not enough money in the Highway Trust Fund to cover current funding for highway construction and transit capital investment. And so both the House and Senate, they chose not to raise the gas tax, but they decided to create find revenue through a variety of what I'll call cats and dogs sources. One is to steal money, for example, from the surplus of the Federal Reserve. And another one is to raise customs fees and shift those fees to the Highway Trust Fund. None of them really have anything to do with transportation. But right now, the Senate leadership, the House and Senate leaders are trying to decide, do they want to give all of those non-transportation revenues to the transportation bill so that they can have a 6-year bill at current funding, or do they want a shorter duration bill that possibly increases funding? So they're trying to, the leadership and the House and Senate are working through that right now. And the bill could be as long as 6 years, or it could be as short as 4 or 5 years. So that's one of the big issues right now. There is a fight going on. One of the outstanding issues is, I think Brad earlier mentioned the Low-No program being one of these bills. There is a fight to try to increase a discretionary grant program for bus facility projects. In the last transportation bill, the Congress decided to eliminate all the discretionary grants, and they cut $500 million out of funding for bus and bus facility programs. So the Senate proposes to add about $180 million back for bus and bus facilities, and then set aside $55 million for the Low-No grant program, which, as we heard earlier, is one of the priorities for PSDA. So the Senate is $180 million. The House is adding $353 million for this bus program, but no set-aside for Low-No. And the way they propose to, since it's a zero-sum game, what the House is proposing is to eliminate a formula program that goes to 7 northeastern states. And so the fight, obviously, is between those 7 northeastern states trying to preserve what they've got, and then bus systems around the country trying to advocate for more money for this grant program. That is probably going to be one of the last issues that's resolved. And just to kind of preview how it could be solved to everyone's satisfaction, is if they have a shorter-term bill, if they have a 5-year bill, let's say, and take all the revenue that was in the House in one of the bills, they could actually increase funding and keep both those programs whole. So that's advocating for right now. The current funding for the current program, the extension expires this coming Friday. Congress is moving through a 2-week extension. I know that seems ludicrous when you're talking about multi-year planning, but they think they can wrap everything up by December 4th, and so they're trying to pass a short-term 2-week extension that will keep the pressure on them to get everything done and have a bill sent to the president by December 4th. We'll see. The second bill, this is very quick, is the annual appropriations bill. So for transit, you have the multi-year policy bill, and then you've got the annual appropriations bill. If you recall, a couple weeks ago, Congress passed a bipartisan budget agreement that provides an additional $25 billion for non-defense spending for this year. That money is being allocated among the different appropriations bills, and the one thing we're pushing for is to try to get as much money into the FTA, New Starts and Small Starts program that doesn't have a direct benefit for the PSTA, but what it would do, and I think Congressman Jolly mentioned this to you a month or two ago on one of his calls, is that by trying to get more money into the Small Starts program, in funding the projects that FDA currently has recommended for funding, will create room for the Central Avenue BRT project, assuming FDA proposes funding for it. It'll create room in the budget for you to get money in the next fiscal year. So we're trying to help get that money as high as possible for this current fiscal year, and that will create the opportunity, hopefully, for PSTA to get this project funded more quickly. So I'm happy to answer any questions. There's many other issues, but I just want to focus on the two right now.
Questions?
How many projects are on FTA?
How many projects are, I'm sorry?
Yeah, you said you were trying to get the rationale was trying to get the funding high enough to fund all the ones that are currently on it. And New Start.
Yeah, I believe there are 9 small start projects that have been proposed for funding in FY 2016.
You know the dollar amount for the 9?
I don't off the top of my head. I can tell you that the House fully funded all 9 projects.
Oh, okay.
Like $350 million. The Senate provided $30 million, and so the discrepancy between the two is significant. And what we're trying to do is get the House, and that's where Mr. Jolly has been enormously helpful, trying to get the House to push for its higher funding level so that in the final bill, that $350 million will then fund all of those 9 projects.
Okay. Thank you.
As Steve said early on, to me, it's just a little bit amusing watching my fellow transit brethren. The House passed this bill that was great for PSTA's priority project to increase bus funding. As Steve just said, it increased substantially the bus capital funding that we might be able to access. And but it takes it out of the transit funding for these 7 New England states. And to see, there's been a whole bunch of articles recently from New York transit systems, who are all my friends, complaining about how they are going to be decimated and they're going to have to make massive cuts because they're going to lose $2 million of bus funding. And then I look back and say how much we lost when Congressman Young could no longer earmark $2 million a year in bus funding, and it's the exact same sort of impact. I don't feel too sorry for those guys, but I don't know. They have a very powerful senator, Chuck Schumer, who is big on this. You know, New York City stands to lose a lot of money, and so whether or not one senator can go up against all those House members and from all the other, 43 states, it'll be a nice battle.
Flowers or what?
Yeah, but I don't know. It's all going to come down here right by. They're going to do an extension, and there'll be some decision before the holidays. I would imagine.
Now, your northern brethren, they get funding for some of them got rail and subways, right?
Oh yeah.
So they get funding for that too. Which is just bus you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, the state of New York, in addition to benefiting greatly from Fed money, they get very high chunk of their money from their state. The locals pay relatively minimal. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, my dad was on the transit board, and it's just funny talking to him about the state pays like 80%. So they would have big, long 3-hour meetings about spending like $1,500 for a whole new route. No wonder. It's all relative. But thank you, Steve.
Steve, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have Gray Robinson on the line yet for the state update?
I don't think we, is anyone from Gray Robinson on the phone? I got a text from Robert saying he had a meeting with the speaker. So I think he is not on anymore to give us a state update.
Well, we can move ahead to talk about the PSTA MPO meeting agenda, and then if Gray Robinson jumps back on, we can move back to the state legislative update. Steve Palmer, thank you very much. Thank you for all you do. Is he already on?
Thank you. No, I'm here, sorry. Thank you very much. I put it on mute so I wouldn't interrupt you.
Much appreciated. Okay, Brad, I want to take it away, and I just want to say, I was really impressed with the materials that you put together in advance of this discussion. Thank you. I think this is an important topic.
Oh, thanks to Whit Blanton, who is here, the Executive Director of the MPO, and our staff. As the item on page 13 shows, we have a scheduled joint meeting of the PSTA Board and the MPO Board. And one thing that I think is obvious, but will be key to making our priorities a success, is to make sure that the PSTA priorities aren't done in a vacuum, but they are done in response to and in coordination with the priorities of the MPO, and that the two organizations, start to work much closer together. That we are the transit provider for Pinellas County, but the MPO is the transportation planning entity for the county of all modes. And so our priorities need to respond to the priorities of the MPO boards, and hopefully their priorities will be influenced by the priorities of the transit board. Well, you didn't get a copy of this, but I think I saw a copy. Okay. I don't know if you want to say anything about sort of these objectives, with the objective being that just trying to coordinate the priorities of the two boards together.
I think you hit the main point, Brad. What I wanted to just convey is that we're at I think, a critical time of reforming how we do our transportation planning in Pinellas County. And in order to handle that reform, we just need to clarify roles and responsibilities. And I think that's always important when you're talking about MPOs and transit agencies. So it's a statewide issue, and frankly, it's a national issue where there's a lot of times agencies aren't in sync with how they move forward. So I'm trying to really make sure our process enables that. We are writing what's called our Unified Planning Work Program now, starting that process. It's due to our board in March, and then the state approves it in May. That lays out what we're going to do over the next 2 years in terms of our planning priorities and planning activities. And that absolutely has to be done in sync with PSTA if we're going to go forward jointly. What we have laid out are our 3 emphasis areas for a vision for the US 19 corridor, the gateway area, master plan for connectivity, and then enhancing beach access. And there is a significant role that PSTA plays in each one of those. And as we were talking with PSTA staff last week, in each of those areas, I think there are opportunities for us to think about what's next beyond your immediate priorities, such as Central Avenue BRT and the Low-No program and others, and how do we begin identifying where transit really needs to be addressed as a priority within our corridors in terms of our mobility strategies. And right now, the way we put our priorities together is we take your priorities and we put them in one area of our transportation improvement program. We take our bike ped priorities and we put them in another area of our transportation improvement program. And then we take our highway projects and we put them in another area. And that just fosters a stovepipe mentality of looking at transportation. And what we ought to be doing is, whether it's US 19 corridor or the Gateway area, what are the package of transportation strategies that make the most sense? And then how do we prioritize those? So we're actually going to be taking some time this fall looking into some best practices around the country of other NPOs who have done this, prioritized multimodal transportation projects. And it's going to be new for our board members, but I think if we can have a discussion of some of those examples from other NPO areas to present, we can talk a little bit about how we have developed priorities as individual agencies in the past and what's worked, what hasn't worked so well in that. And then we could look at where we go next in terms of emphasis areas and how we integrate transit into that. I think that could be a very productive discussion. The other component to the work session, I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but FDOT has requested some time on the agenda to come talk to us about alignment and what they would like to see and what kind of things they're looking for. And I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to lay out how we're working together first. And then we invite DOT to react to that and reinforce some things. So I think that can be helpful for us.
What's your name?
Whit Blanton.
He started talking.
I'm sorry.
Where are we with the, I was on NPO. I cycled off just when they were going through the hiring process to hire you. And we also made a trip down to Miami Dade with Congressman Micah. Spent a whole day with him at the Special. And where are we with the, I think it's 13 NPOs in the area? Is it more than that?
In this area, we've got 3 in the Tampa Bay Transportation Management area, and then we've got another 3 more beyond that.
Well, I guess I like what you're saying, but where are we at with the 10 number ones? I mean, how do you get the bus number 1 so everybody get behind it? We have a great opportunity for getting funding because, you know, St. Pete got this, then he may have that, you know, so how do you, I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I think that's hugely important. For the last 2 years, we've been meeting as a Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group. That's Pasco County, Hillsborough County, and Pinellas County. From a federal funding standpoint, we are one entity. We are one area. And so we get a set of dollars that we then allocate for that TMA, either through our flexible dollars or that DOT, our state DOT spends. And they have long maintained that we need to speak as one voice, and that's what the TMA Leadership Group is doing. So they have adopted regional transportation priorities. Central Avenue BRT is part of that, as is the CSX line going up to Brooksville. So we've got that in place. I think we've got some additional work to do, but I think that organizational structure is working well.
I like the approach of getting your house and shopping or whatever before you invite the other organization to help out in. And you're exactly right. Where CSS might not make sense in some areas like downtown St. Pete, but in other areas in Pasco, it might because of where they run. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I like that. But obviously, what I did see and what we did see, I guess, down in Miami, they had $3 billion projects coming out of the ground. The tunnel, the Venice Lane, Sunrail, and also the Mobile Center was huge. And then we had lunch with every organization I could think of. They had down there sitting around the table, and everybody's going one direction, right behind Congressman Micah, and all the billions are flowing right along with it.
Chairman Johnson?
The one thing that I don't see on this list, and maybe it's implied here, but is the more the PPC type of what kind of communities do we want to create, or what kind of communities do we need to create in order to be vibrant and attractive in the future, and where does the transit piece fit within that future communities? And I just was wondering if that's included here.
It's in there simply because as part of our 3 emphasis areas, that's a land use also is a critical component. The PPC is not really the regulatory body that it used to be, and I don't think there's much appetite for that. But we've enabled the planning, and now what we've got to do is really match the enabling of those plans and development activities with catalyst dollars on the transportation side to move that along. Because if we just say it's okay for you guys to do, but we don't provide any incentives for transportation dollars, then it doesn't really have that much of an effect. So we've got to, I really want to look at our transportation planning work plan, or TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program, as our capital improvements program of the countywide land use plan. And that's a new way of thinking that I think local governments are used to that. You put together a future land use plan and then you build the capital improvements program. The MPO hasn't really ever done that. And so that's where we're evolving.
And I'm also on the MPO as well as PSTA, and I think, the purpose of this discussion is to get ideas how we can expand the discussion between PSTA and MPO. So I think also, and again, this is implied in a lot of the questions, I think there's, to me, it's an interesting tension, it's a creative tension between looking at, this is the way things have always been done versus what are some new ways, what are some more strategic ways we can look at things going forward. And I would hope that we would address that transit should be really more a part. The MPO board members also have a responsibility to feel some kind of responsibility or willingness to really honor and push forward the mission of PSTA, that the buses aren't just the responsibility of the 2 or 3 people on MPO who happen to be on PSTA, but that all MPO board members, PSTA shouldn't be the stepchild. And, part of that, I think that old way, this is the way things have always been done, is that assumption that, MPO is like the Highway Planning Commission for the county, and PSTA, they're the bus people. And so I would like to see more of a synthesis. And I know that's what the purpose of the whole meeting is, but I just wanted to put like a finer point on it.
I think that's a very good point. And just affirming how important transit is to each one of the board members, but overall, I would say just health of Pinellas County. I think where it sits on their scale, I think it's important to understand.
And conversely, PSTA board members need to have a competency and understanding of the full role of the MPO as well. Who joined us?
Robert Stewart's here, Madam Chair. How are you? Sorry we're getting a little bit behind here.
No problem. We understand. We're flexible. It's nice to have you join us, Robert. We were just discussing some details about our upcoming joint meeting between the MPO and PSTA. Were there any final comments on that before we head back to Robert? So, Robert, we'll be ready to come back to you in about 4 minutes.
Okay, perfect. I'll stay right here.
Okay.
Just to elaborate on my chair's comment. When I was on just before I cycled off MPO, it was post-green light. And as she was stating, it was 3 or 4 people that was on PSTA on MPO at that time. And then it was a move to, I guess, abandon the need for transportation altogether after that went. So I don't know what's the chemistry now for as transportation, because that was quote unquote a bus thing. So I'm saying post that, because to me, my last testimony on the MPO is that we definitely need mass transit. The voters have spoken, and I respect that, because I never figured I'd come to vote. However, it doesn't change the need and how we're going to get there. And a lot of people are saying, well, hey, green light out, get rid of this, start over. And I'm like, wait a minute. The research is sound. We just couldn't get the financing mechanism to support where we were trying to go. But that is still there. So I'm wondering, as the ownership of the whole body, and speaking for transportation, or FDOT's, we're Florida Department of Transportation, not of roads. So they're looking for transportation options. So, I mean, is that the mindset moving forward?
I think it is. I think there's a good, strong level of support among the MPO for a holistic look at transportation. What we've got to do is just kind of frame that conversation so that it's one clear message, but it's different voices of how we express that. It means something different if you're in North County, it means something different if you're in the East Bay corridor, it means something different if you're in St. Petersburg, but it's still working toward a transportation system that supports the economic growth and community sustainability of Pinellas County. And I think we can get behind that, and that's really why I wanted to focus on those three emphasis areas, because they are multi-jurisdictional in nature. They are the economic engine of our county and what we contribute to the region. And if we're not functioning with a clear vision for US 19, for Gateway, and for enhancing access to the beaches, then we're not functioning very well as a county. So I think that's a start of a fresh conversation. And maybe in a few years we'll be emboldened enough to go back with a new strategy, whether it's to the voters, or whether it's to DOT, or whether it's to the county commission.
I just want to, I know we're wrapping up, I just want to thank you for being here and for your comments and for working so well with PSTA. And I really appreciate the comments you made about an effort to be less siloed in our approach to planning. And I think, you know, I would echo your comments, Madam Chair, about, you know, helping both agencies and both boards sort of see ways to work together. I think is really important. And along those lines, I've heard you give presentations before about other communities around the country that have really successful transit plans. Like I've heard you talk about Charlotte, and I know even in Florida there are communities where the MPO and the bus service are working together, and the MPOs are providing support for the bus services capital needs. I think that's the case in Orlando and in Hillsborough. And so, I mean, it might be helpful in the beginning of the meeting to sort of provide a little summary for both boards about how beneficial it is from other communities' perspectives to be working together, so that there can be hopefully some support on the MPO side going forward to help us with our capital needs on the long-term front. And I guess the one thought in the back of my mind, and we don't have to talk about this now because I know we're sort of out of time, but is what more information can we be providing your board about the type of careful planning we're doing? Because I think our staff is doing really careful planning in terms of our capital expenditures and the way we smoothed out our bus purchases, so that your board can feel comfortable, you know, in the future with the fact that we're doing everything we can, and when we're looking to the MPO, we're really looking because we need help. We haven't done anything irresponsibly, if that makes sense. So, but anyway, thanks for coming. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lyman. Your being here means a lot, and it's all about cooperation, coordination, and support. Thank you. All right, so we are going to pick up our state legislative update, and we have Mr. Robert Stewart from Gray Robinson on the line. Hi, Robert.
Hey, good morning, Madam Chair. How are you?
We're doing really well. We've got Commissioner
Good.
Ben Diamond, Commissioner Wingay, Commissioner/Mayor Doug Vivas, and we have our Chairman, Bill Johnson, here.
Great. Well, just very quickly, I know you guys have already had a long morning, so I'll be brief and happy to answer any questions. But I am here in Tallahassee for what is the second to last committee meeting week before the regular session. As you all will recall, the session is early this year in January and February, so there is a committee meeting this week. There's a committee meeting the week after Thanksgiving, so that's Monday the 30th. They'll start another one, and they'll go through Wednesday, Thursday of that week. And then they are off, and not in Tallahassee, until January 11th, which is the first day of the regular legislative session. They'll be there. That'll start the 60-day clock, and the second Friday in March, they will be done, hopefully. Of course, we thought that last time, but they should be done and out of Tallahassee at that point. This will be the first year of what is likely to be a every other year early session. I think where the legislature would like to get is where in the odd numbered years they meet in March and April as per the usual, and in the even numbered years they meet in January and February. Quick bit of history: we had 2 special legislative sessions over the last few months. The first was on congressional redistricting. That one ended without the legislature coming to any sort of resolution of what the congressional maps ought to look like. The courts are now going to settle that. And then just last month, earlier this month I should say, the Senate special session, or the special session on the Florida Senate maps ended in much the same way, with the legislature unable to come to agreement on what the maps ought to look like, and the courts will ultimately settle that as well. So the uncertainty around the districts and who will be running when remains. One of the uncertainties that is now settled, though, is the Senate presidency race for the term that will begin in November of 2016. As you'll all recall, Senator Joe Negron from Palm Beach County and the Stewart area, and Senator Jeff Latvala from your hometown, your own county, were both vying for the Senate presidency. By all accounts, it was a very close race for commitments from senators, and the special session on the redistricting threw a wrench into all of that. With if all 40 senators have to run again, had they had to run again, there could have been great uncertainty in that leadership battle. Senator Latvala, on the final day of the legislative special session in early November, conceded the race. He'll be supporting and throwing all of his support behind Senator Negron, who will be designated as the Speaker designate on December 2nd now. And in exchange for that, Senator Latvala will be the budget chair from 2016 to 2018, obviously a very powerful position as appropriations chair. So that, at least that cloud of uncertainty around the legislature, and specifically around the Senate, is taken care of, which is a nice piece in the valley, if you want to call it that, at least for a little while. On specific PSTA items, we are continuing to work with your legislative delegation, with leadership as the appropriations process begins, to make sure that all of the necessary forms are in the right hands and inputted, and that we're selling the projects that are of most importance to PSTA. And then, of course, in January, we are looking forward to having y'all up here to do a couple days of meetings, making sure that we have the most impact for your days on the ground here as we try to advance those priorities. So that, I think, is a quick snapshot of where we are here at the state level. And, of course, happy, Brad, to touch on anything else that you want me to touch on or answer any questions that y'all might have. Again, I apologize for being late today. Thanks for your flexibility.
Questions, comments? Brad?
So just to recap the schedule ahead of us and our Tallahassee plan visit. We're not going to have a PSA Legislative Committee meeting in December. The December 2nd one is now been canceled. We will have our PSA board meeting on the 9th of December. We have a scheduled Legislative Committee right after the New Year on January 6th, where we will probably lay out a game plan for a visit to Tallahassee on January 20th and 21st. It's a Wednesday and Thursday. January 21st is the first ever Florida Statewide Transit Day. And that is also Transportation Disadvantage Day. So Patty Johnson will no doubt be going with us as well to try to get some more funding out of them for Transportation Disadvantage. That's on January 20th, 21st. Then like last year, the St. Pete Chamber and the other Pinellas chambers, and I would recommend PSTA at the same time, join with them and go to Tallahassee with the rest of Pinellas County on Monday, February 8th. But, so, we can talk about that, right? Yeah. And arrange for plans. Again, whether you come, you're interested in going to both or to one of those, let me know.
So January 20th/21st and tentatively Monday, February 8th. And did you
Yeah.
say January 21st is the first statewide transit day? Is that-
Thursday, the 21st, is Transportation Disadvantage Day, which has been celebrated for a long time, and for the first time, they're also calling it Transit Day. And all the transit systems from around the state will be up there at the same time. There'll be, I think, some buses from different parts of the state, maybe on display, which is like a thing they like to do there. So, not to be confused with Taxi Cab Day and Uber Day and all the other days they have there. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions for Robert? Okay, Robert, we're letting you off easy.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Any future meeting subjects? Okay. Or any other business to discuss?
I just want to thank you guys for the presentation about the Low-No grant. I'm excited. I think you did a great job in thinking about the application. And I know there's a lot of politics and a lot of this is beyond our control. So just put our best foot forward and see what happens. So thank you for doing that.
Do we have a feel of how many first-time applicants actually get awarded?
No, I think it helps. I think it maybe helps to be a first time.
Yeah.
And Brad, this is Steve again. I can answer that question. The awards that were given in February of this year was the first time it was ever awarded.
So I felt very positive. I don't know if this has anything, but I was at my national research conference about 3 weeks ago, and this woman introduced herself with FTA, and she's brand new, and she is, I identified, and I asked her afterwards, and she said, yes, she is the #1 person who reads all the applications and makes the recommendations. So I spent the rest of the meeting hanging out with her, and then on the flight back home, I got an invite from her to be my LinkedIn friend, so, hey.
Send her flowers?
I don't know. I talked up our project, so.
Those relationships are important. But
yeah.
They are.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank the committee. This is my last legislative meeting, so hopefully I see you guys on the dark side. I'm running for State House. I'm termed out here as council member, but the advocacy is very important. I mean, over my whole term on council, my 2 terms, I went back and forth to Tallahassee lobbying for juvenile justice, and I can tell you it's a lonely place when the representatives don't see anybody. I mean, I often see Bill up there, we're running back and forth into each other, going from door to door, but it's important that you don't just have these issues. You've got to go up there and advocate. They got to see you, they need you, because they got other people buying for these same dollars, and it makes the difference. Believe me, it makes a difference. But I know you guys will do well. It's all about advocacy and having a plan. Not a perfect plan, but a plan. And you'll do great, but I enjoyed my time and all the stuff I've learned, and working with you guys has been a blast, so thank you.
And I'd like to thank you too, and I hope we're going to have a couple more opportunities to give a final goodbye to you on the PSTA, to thank you for your service and the important and unique and unmistakable voice and clarity that you bring to this process.
Thank you.
No, I'm serious. I'm going to miss you. Thank you for everything you've done. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wingate, can we say goodbye to you again? Can you participate in your last personnel committee meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just started again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What we have? Yeah, they changed that before you came in again.
9:30?
No, it's always been 9:30. I think this is a special.
Oh,
Because we have
special one.
personnel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have personnel behind